A king lay dying in Jericho, his body devoured by disease, his mind devoured by fear. Herod the Great had murdered his own sons to keep his throne. And now, foreign priests from the east arrived at his gate asking a single question that would unravel him. Where is he who has been born King of the Jews? Not if, where? These were not shepherds, not peasants. They were Magi, astrologer priests, men who read the heavens for a living, men whose entire profession depended on never being wrong about the sky. And they had seen something up there so undeniable, so mathematically certain, that they crossed deserts to bow before an infant. What did they see? For 2,000 years, scholars have searched the heavens for that light, a comet, a planetary alignment, a dying star exploding into glory, Babylonian tablets, Chinese court astronomers, Roman records. The answer has been sitting in the historical archive the entire time, buried beneath centuries of nativity paintings and children's pageants that softened a story that was, in truth, a calculated act of celestial mathematics and political terror. By the end of this investigation, the seeker will know exactly what hung in that sky and why a king was willing to slaughter children to extinguish it. Welcome to Bible Secrets, Hidden History. Before this investigation unfolds further, consider joining this community of seekers by subscribing. If this history deserves to be preserved and examined honestly, a simple like helps this forgotten truth reach others who are searching. The Magi of the East. The Gospel of Matthew names them Magi, a Greek transliteration of an old Persian word. Not wise men in the gentle sense modern translations suggest. The Magi were a priestly caste, heirs to the Zoroastrian astrologer priests of Babylon and Persia. Herodotus described them centuries earlier as one of the 6 tribes of the Medes, men entrusted with interpreting dreams, omens, and the movements of the heavens for kings. By the 1st century, the Magi were embedded in the courts of Parthia, Rome's great eastern rival. They were not folk healers. They were the scientific elite of the ancient world, the men a king consulted before going to war, before naming an heir, before making any decision of consequence. The Babylonian astronomical diaries, clay tablets recovered from Babylon and now housed in the British Museum, record planetary movements with stunning precision for the exact era of Christ's birth. These were not myths. These were data logs, kept nightly by professional astronomers for centuries. If a celestial event mattered enough to be remembered, it was written in cuneiform long before Matthew ever picked up a pen. This matters because it tells the seeker something crucial. Whatever the Magi saw was not a vague feeling. It was observable, trackable, real enough to convince trained scientists to abandon their posts and travel over 1,000 miles. The Comet Theory. The most ancient explanation comes from the Chinese imperial astronomical records. The Han Dynasty court kept meticulous logs of guest stars, unexpected lights that appeared and vanished from the sky. One such object was recorded around 5 BC, visible for roughly 70 days in the constellation Capricornus. A comet fit the poetic image, a blazing tail streaking westward, almost guiding. Origen, the early Christian theologian, leaned into this interpretation in the 3rd century, comparing the star to comets recorded by Greek and Roman historians. But there is a problem the seeker must confront. In the ancient world, comets were not signs of blessing. They were omens of catastrophe, the death of kings, the fall of empires. Pliny the Elder cataloged them as harbingers of disaster. Would learned Magi travel toward a king's birth, chasing a symbol of doom? It strains the very astrological logic that defined their profession. The triple conjunction. A more mathematically elegant theory emerged from the work of the German astronomer Johannes Kepler in the early 17th century. Kepler calculated that in 7 BC, Jupiter and Saturn underwent a rare triple conjunction, passing close to one another 3 times within the same year in the constellation Pisces. To the Magi, this was not decoration. It was a coded message written in the language they had spent their lives learning to read. In Babylonian astrology, Jupiter represented kingship, the star of rulers. Saturn was associated in some traditions with the land of Israel itself. Pisces, the fish, was tied to the last days and the end of an age. A Babylonian astrological text, known as the Star Almanac, dated to roughly 7 BC and preserved on a cuneiform tablet, records the precise positions of Jupiter and Saturn in Pisces during that very year. This is not speculation. This is a contemporary document, written by the very class of priest astronomers who would later appear at Herod's door. To the trained eye of a Babylonian magus, this configuration could be read as nothing less than a divine decree. A great king was rising in Judea. The Roman shadow. The seeker must understand the political furnace into which this child was born. Herod the Great was not a Jewish king by blood. He was an Idumean, installed by Rome, paranoid and brutal. The Jewish historian Flavius Josephus, writing in his Antiquities of the Jews, records that Herod executed his own wife, 3 of his sons, and countless rivals, real and imagined, in his final years. Caesar Augustus himself reportedly joked, according to later tradition, that it was safer to be Herod's pig than Herod's son. A grim pun, since Herod's Idumean heritage forbade him from eating pork, yet not from killing his own children. This was the man who heard that foreign astrologers were searching for a newborn king. Matthew's Gospel records his response with chilling precision. He summoned the Magi secretly, demanded the exact time the star appeared, and sent them to Bethlehem under the pretense of wanting to worship the child himself. It was a lie, and it was a calculated one. A man this ruthless does not ask for a location out of curiosity. He asks for a target, the slaughter and the silence. When the Magi, warned in a dream, refused to return and report back, Herod's response was the massacre of the innocents, the execution of every male child in Bethlehem under the age of 2, an age range Herod set based on the star's appearance, calculated backward from the Magi's own testimony. Secular Roman and Jewish records of this exact era are fragmented, and the massacre is not independently corroborated by Josephus, a silent skeptics have long pointed to. Yet Bethlehem was a small village. Modern estimates place its population in the low hundreds, meaning the number of infant boys may have been small enough to escape notice in the broader chronicles of a tyrant already infamous for slaughter. Sometimes the absence of a record is not evidence of absence. It is evidence of how unremarkable one more atrocity seemed, set against a reign already soaked in blood. This was the price of that star. Not sentiment, not a peaceful manger scene frozen in painted glass, a celestial sign so politically explosive it ended in infant graves. The Hebrew root of prophecy. The Magi did not arrive in Judea blind. Centuries earlier, the pagan prophet Balaam, hired to curse Israel, instead delivered a prophecy recorded in the book of Numbers. A star shall come out of Jacob, and a scepter shall rise out of Israel. The Hebrew word used here, kokab, means simply star. But in prophetic and astrological tradition across the ancient Near East, a star was never merely a star. It was a symbol of a ruler, a kingdom, a turning point in history. Babylonian and Persian astrologer priests, the ancestors of the very Magi who appear in Matthew's account, may have preserved this prophecy for generations, a forgotten lineage of expectation stretching back to the Babylonian exile, when Jewish exiles lived among, and likely taught, the astrological schools of Mesopotamia. This is the unveiled mystery. The Magi were not random foreigners stumbling onto Judean politics. They may have been the inheritors of an ancient, cross-cultural prophetic tradition, half astrology, half scripture, passed down for 5 centuries, waiting for one final configuration in the sky to confirm what had long been foretold. So what hung in that sky? The evidence, weighed honestly, points not to a single miraculous light, but to a convergence, a triple conjunction of Jupiter and Saturn in Pisces, a sign no random villager could have read, but one that men trained for a lifetime in the science of the heavens could not ignore. It was not magic. It was not myth. It was a precise astronomical event, interpreted through an inherited prophetic framework that stretched back to Babylon itself. The star did not simply announce a birth. It collided 2 ancient worlds, Babylonian astrology and Hebrew prophecy, into a single, undeniable sign. And it cost a village its children, and a tyrant his peace. Because true power has always feared the birth of something it cannot control. This is the deeper truth the seeker carries forward. The sacred and the scientific were never enemies in the ancient mind. The same eyes that calculated planetary orbits also bowed before a manger. Perhaps the line between faith and evidence was never as wide as the modern world insists. The archives remain open. More hidden truths wait to be unsealed in the next investigation.